I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy.
And today we want to talk about why we left Vancouver, Canada to live in Mexico City.
Okay, so why did we leave Canada for Mexico City?
I mean, there's the obvious normal reasons like housing costs, cost of living, and healthcare. But then there's the more ideological reasons, which I think are also a reason why a lot of people are leaving, but they're not willing to talk about it openly.
I think a lot of people, yeah, I think you're right. They don't want to talk about it openly and they're giving these other reasons. But COVID really opened up a lot of people's eyes to like what the government was doing behind the scenes. It really made people politically aware of basically politics. I was non-political before that.
And it showed people how far they're willing to go in one aspect and then how little they're willing to do in the others, like the normal ones, housing, cost of living, etc. But so basically, a little bit of background. I'm from Mexico originally, so soy mexicana, viví toda mi vida en la Ciudad de Mexico, and then in 2011, I decided to move to Vancouver, Canada to study. And when I got there, it was just as they had told me in the pamphlets. It was great. It felt safe. It was so diverse and it was so beautiful. Yes, it rained a lot, and there was some things that were more expensive. But even back then, the Canadian dollar was way stronger, and it was still during the Harper prime ministership, so it was still pretty, conservative.
I got there around the same time you did, and I was born in Canada, but lived most of the time in the States. My mother died when I was young, so my grandparents took me, and then I lived as an adult for a long time in the United States as well. I had citizenship, and I found out my father was alive, so I moved back to Canada to meet him. That didn't work out so well, but when I got to Canada, I thought it was pretty amazing at first, to be honest with you. Rents were low, jobs were plentiful, and the pay was extremely high, especially compared to the United States at the time. So, and I was non-political. And the ideology there, even because I was non-political, it wasn't this crazy polarization and this tip of the spear LGBTQ politics that it turned to at the end, which really woke me up after COVID.
And well, for me, I have one of the earliest videos I've made. I do detail how I was involved in that whole LGBTQ, women's rights, anti-Trump, pro-Trudeau group. I mean, I was coming from a university, so I basically got my marching orders, and then I just kept getting more and more political, but towards the left. And I was very involved. I was volunteering a lot. I was volunteering in LGBTQ youth groups, but it was because of that I saw how the ideology started to seep even further into other spaces. And that's when I started to wonder, like, is this actually a good path to be on? And should I be supporting all of this? And then whenever I would speak to my friends, especially from university, and saying, like, I don't agree with some of these things. Why are we being so forceful about protests? Or why are we putting hate on people that think differently than us? And all the responses I would get was just like, because they're evil, they're terrible. So I started to look into other people and other ways of thinking and the bad people that they would tout, for example, Jordan Peterson. And that's when I started seeing what the Canadian government and what lengths the Canadian government was willing to go, for example, considering speech, because he had a very important case about compelled speech.
I grew up in the States a lot of my life, and because I was non-political, I just assumed free speech was a given right. And I assumed Canada had free speech when I moved here, and it kind of seemed like it did because I would say anything I wanted. But as time went on, I realized Canada didn't have free speech, and the legislation was there all along to take away that free speech whenever they wanted. And when they did decide to take it away, they replaced it with compelled speech, making you say people's pronouns, and hate speech laws will throw you in jail if the government deems something you said was hateful.
Yes, because the free speech laws, according to the Charter of Rights, does have that except in or but clause that completely essentially could remove free speech. And then with this Jordan Peterson thing, I saw it firsthand. I was volunteering at an LGBTQ youth group, and like a teenage girl who had different pronouns was talking to another teenage girl that had different pronouns, and one of them did not give the correct pronouns, and she punched her. And this was condoned by the people that were working there.
Well,
And
you have to realize Vancouver is the tip of the spear
yes.
for LGBTQ and political wokeness.
Mhm.
A lot of the NGO funding actually goes into Vancouver, and it acts as a test ground to try these ideas out, and then it makes its way down to Washington, Oregon, California. Once it hits California, they pretty much have their game plan ready to go, and then from there they try to bring it across the United States. So that's why Vancouver is really ahead of the political curve when it came to this LGBTQ stuff. And it was really eye-opening. And nobody was believing me from the States when I would talk about it because it was so far ahead. Mexico is just now starting to see it. And it's a decade later almost.
Yes, we receive everything about 10 years later, and once it's been fully cooked and ready to go. But again, I started this whole journey and this disagreement with the general populace journey way before I guess other people did. So I felt super alone. And then it was during, because not even you believe me, you were very apolitical and you weren't into it. And I was just like talking about all these crazy things. And I remember I would say, like, oh, I think I like Trump. He's interesting, especially when we started hitting COVID. And you would say, oh, he's terrible, but you didn't like him, and you would call me Baby Trump.
Yeah, I remember I constantly call you Baby Trump, and you didn't mind it. You laughed.
No, I was like, that's good.
But for me, I was non-political, and the little news I did watch, I assumed it would have a little bit of unbiased because in the States they have Fox News and CNN. In Canada, it's a monolith of one set of ideas that's completely funded by the government.
Yeah, it's subsidized.
Every year they put a couple billion dollars for these liberal news agencies to have their talking points. So when I would watch the news, Trump is bad, I believed it. It took a lot of research for me to wake up that I was being fed lies. And that went down a whole rabbit hole of me really waking up. So I guess I have a thank you to say to Trump for standing up.
And me.
And you, yeah.
Because I liked him because he was completely different from anything I was seeing while being in Canada. And he was saying things that I thought were not allowed to be said. And he had a different take. And the fact that he could become back then president was like, oh.
Well, and when I seen how he handled COVID and things like that, it was really a contrast to the Canadian government. Not that the American government had COVID perfect by any means or even good by any means. But Trump gave you the choice whether to get vaccinated or whether to not. It was on you. And Canada, it wasn't that way. You weren't allowed in restaurants. You weren't allowed in stores. They were taking your job. It was just like a real eye-opener to government authoritarianism and what they could do.
Yeah, and not only an eye-opener, but like, I mean, I never got it, but I was barred from going into any restaurant for 6 months.
Well, I had a fake vaccine passport.
We had fake ones.
So I would go into a restaurant or I would work somewhere,
but technically we weren't allowed to.
Yeah, people didn't know I wasn't vaccinated. Yeah, and so I would hear these conversations, and Canada had one of the highest vaccination rates, and this ideology just went right through Canada. So when you would go and these people would think they're amongst their own. They would talk about how the unvaccinated people need to die. They
can't go to hospitals.
They shouldn't be able to go to hospitals. It was crazy what I was hearing. It was something from like Hitler in the World War II, I would think. And it was just eye-opening to me that not only the government was saying this, but a lot of the population took it.
And a lot of the, let's say, local population, because there's a lot of immigration that has been happening for the past 30 years, especially from, for example, China, now India. Some Mexicans, some Latin Americans that, I mean, are my friends. But in general, I feel like most people, the local people that have roots in Canada were the ones that were saying these kinds of things. And then there was another group of people that maybe didn't agree with it, didn't really want to have to take it, but because of their jobs, because they maybe want to get citizenship, they were essentially coerced and scared into doing it. Well, and I completely disagree with that.
One of the crazy things is every night at, like, I don't know, 6 o'clock, everybody's out their window banging pots and pans. Thank you to the nurses and doctors. And then when the nurses and doctors, of the very large group of them, did not want to get vaccinated, they just fired them, and nobody stood up for them, and everybody said they should be fired. 1 month you're thanking them, and they're attending to people that are sick. Even though they're not vaccinated, they're putting their own life at risk. And the next minute you want to fire them.
Yep. And we went to some of those protests. And then, I mean, from there, we saw the trucker convoy.
Freedom rally today.
I'm a racist. No, I'm joking.
Well, we got a racist and Black Lives Matter here.
Well, I mean, you know, obviously this is about freedom. This is about the children. This is about the future of our country. This is about having our rights respected, no matter like what you want to do with your body. This is about having your rights respected, and everybody needs to be out here.
I agree with you.
We got to hold the line.
I think so. What were you thinking? Canada was about to give up a few weeks ago, or what?
It got sticky, but no, I knew like this country's built on fighters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I knew the people would come show out.
That's
and
good.
Like just at the right time, the truckers came. They pulled through.
Yeah.
They gave us that hope that we needed. You know what I mean?
Have you been going downtown as well, or just out here?
Yeah, we went downtown. The media's the virus protests. Like
Yeah.
we went around the one of those fake news outlets.
We were down there last
We went
week,
around them, and yeah, we're just letting it be heard, and it's just interesting seeing people's reactions. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but it's nice hearing doctors speak. The Ronald McDonald guy came.
Yeah, I seen that.
Yeah, right. So that was just like very strengthening. Like freedom.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
And the lengths the Canadian government and Trudeau were willing to go. They enacted the Emergencies Act. They started fining people. They stomped on an old lady with a horse in Ontario. It got crazy.
Well,
and they were completely peaceful protests, and they were making it sound like there was the most dangerous thing you could be if you were ever in Ontario. It was so dangerous to be there while the truckers were there, and they were some of the most respectful, nice, lovely protests and groups of people and unity that I had seen in a very, very long time in Canada.
The Canadians really showed how to do a protest, and that model's really been implemented worldwide on how you stand up against an authoritarian government. What I do have to say is, when I say the majority of Canadians en masse did what the government said, this is especially so in Vancouver. Vancouver is the special cohort of a city where they really did what the government said. But there was pockets in Canada that did unite, and we did see, and I was really proud of those people. And we actually went to the border a few times and supported those protests.
Yes.
So.
And I mean, I, in my own little way, kind of fought the government. I got a ticket for not having the shot, and I went through the court system, and eventually they threw them out about a year after because they realized they didn't have any legs to stand on. But that's how far I was willing to go with the fact that I need bodily autonomy, and I'm not going to let them tell me what to do.
I remember you traveled and you came back, and because you weren't vaccinated, every time you left the house, you had to call the government and let them know where you were. It was absolutely crazy. And you were freaked out because one time you forgot to notify the government where you went.
Yeah, for about 10, I think it was 15 days, something like that. And I had to do a bunch of tests. Funnily enough, to this day, and I mean, hopefully I'm not shooting myself in the foot, but to this day, I've never gotten it.
Yeah.
I actually haven't really gotten sick since the whole pandemic thing. So I don't know. Now I think a lot of people have forgotten just how crazy and how bad it was for a long time.
Well, especially in Canada. I think in the States, and maybe it was different because different states
it depends on the state.
Had different ways of dealing with it. Florida dealt with it a lot different than California did. But Canada as a whole, and the things Trudeau was saying, I'm sure we can throw a clip up here. But
you deserve a government that's going to continue to say, get vaccinated. And you know what? If you don't want to get vaccinated, that's your choice. But don't think you can get on a plane or a train besides vaccinated people and put them at risk. We need to be strong in the decisions we're taking going forward, and we need to put people first, which we have always done.
Oui, on va s'en sortir de cette pandémie par la vaccination. Puis on en connaît tous des gens qui sont en train d'hésiter un petit peu. On va continuer d'essayer de les convaincre. Mais il y a aussi des gens qui sont farouchement opposés à la vaccination.
Qui sont extrémistes.
Qui croient pas dans la science, qui sont souvent misogynes, souvent racistes aussi. C'est un petit groupe, mais qui prend de la place. Et là, il faut faire un choix en tant que leader, en tant que pays. Est-ce qu'on Est-ce qu'on tolère ces gens-là ou est-ce qu'on dit, ben voyons, la plupart des gens, presque 80% des Québécois ont fait ce qu'il fallait faire, se sont fait vacciner, on veut revenir aux choses qu'on aime faire. C'est pas ces gens-là qui vont nous bloquer. Mais
There was a couple of times, especially Trudeau seems to think he's always safe when he speaks French because the American media is not going to play
Pick
the
up
French
on it.
clips.
Yeah.
But these French clips, he sounds like a freaking Nazi. And I don't want to focus too much on COVID, but that
Yeah.
was really the awakening
Yes.
to everything that was happening in Canada. So maybe we'll go on to some of the other points and we'll leave the rest of what happened in COVID
Yeah.
for another day.
Well, one last thing. Just as we left, Bonnie Henry, the British Columbia's health person, advisor, secretary, just now lifted the COVID bans on nurses, the vaccination bans on
Yeah.
nurses, and she implemented new ones. So just as we were leaving, it was like, okay, yeah, we made the right decision.
Thing is, are you going to hire these people back? A lot of these people had to leave the province and leave Canada because they needed jobs and they needed the work.
Yeah. And they were trained.
Yeah. Well, one of the other big things that just absolutely woke me up, and because I had researched Trump and all the lies that had happened, I was not so willing to just accept something. I actually wanted to see the evidence after this. And there was something called the mass grave hoax in Canada,
Yeah.
where native bands were claiming that hundreds of indigenous children were killed and buried in these mass graves. And they said they had ground penetrating sonars of all these bodies.
Yeah.
Come to find out, these were garbage dumps and other things. There's not been one body to this day exhumed,
Discovered.
and they're refusing to
let them go
dig
in.
up any sites. And the Canadian government dished out billions of dollars to
Yeah.
this right before an election to get the Indigenous population on their side. A lot of people worldwide still think that's a thing that
that
actually
it
the government
happened.
did, and it's not. Now, what happened in these residential schools wasn't good, but it was not a mass grave hoax.
I mean, it was a mass grave hoax. There wasn't
that was a mass grave
graves.
hoax.
And we lived in downtown Vancouver, very close to the art
God.
gallery. And in the art gallery, there was this display, or I guess like
It was a giant teepee that
Yeah.
took over a huge sector of the public
walking
space.
space. Yeah.
Yeah,
And they allowed them to be there for years.
And
It
they
was
put-
about a year and a half.
and they put a gate up. They gave their propaganda flyers. They had shoes of thousands of children that were supposed to represent these children that were in these graves that were never there.
Yeah.
And to this day, I guarantee you, we will get hate on this video in the comments saying it's true. I urge everybody to research this topic
Yes.
because it didn't happen the way they
And
said
the
it
worst
happened.
part is that people there would get very violent if you ever went to ask them. Like, because there were people always there kind of living in that space with the teepee, and they would yell at people, they would confront people
Well, Trudeau-
whenever you went up and asked about it.
Trudeau took a publicity stunt where he went to the graves, took a knee, acted like this was real. Then he gave a day for these dead children, and everybody wears orange shirts and their
Oh
orange
yeah, the
clothes.
orange shirt day.
And this is a national holiday in Canada. The government has portrayed this hoax and gave it its own day. It's absolutely insane.
Because the way the population has let them kind of mentally change the way they even think about themselves is through colonialism, is through, oh, you're a bad person if you are Canadian and you were born here and your ancestors are terrible because they did all these things.
Well-
That's one of the ways they're controlling the population.
A lot of people don't realize
guilt.
Canada never had slavery. So they're not able to divide the population amongst racial divisions in the same way they are in the States.
Yeah.
So the way they're doing it, rather than using black versus white, they're trying to use indigenous versus colonizer.
Yep. And I mean, it's funny because the colonizers are the local or like born there white Canadians, but every single other immigrant group that has moved to Canada and even has their own special enclaves and cities, places where like in Burnaby, all the signs are in Chinese or in Mandarin. I mean, they're not colonizers, they're immigrants. And we welcome immigrants because we're a very welcoming place. And yet me as an immigrant had never felt so unwelcome anywhere else.
No, and there's a lot of things
Yes,
we're
there's a
going
lot
to
of
get through
points.
here. Another one is parental rights. Parental rights are being absolutely stripped in Canada, and they're being replaced with governmental rights, meaning
Over children.
children. There was one guy we had met up there, and his child had been taken from him because he wasn't going to use the pronouns, and he was
because he was refusing to let his child go through the transition and to be medicalized with puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones. He did not sign the papers, and then he was sent to court, basically.
And his case was just one of many, because in these divorce cases in Canada, usually the woman has the same ideological bent as the government, and she's able to say, well, he doesn't want to get the child vaccinated, that's child abuse, and they'll take the child, or he's not respecting the child's pronouns, or whatever it is. And whatever parent decides to side with the government's dictate is the one that gets primary custody for the most part in the cases that we had researched.
Yeah. And I mean, it hit me in particular because I connected with, and I want to shout out Billboard Chris. He is a great activist from Vancouver, Canada, and I helped him out a bit. He helped me out a bit, but through him, I think I realized even more, specifically in Canada, how badly it's gotten and how they just essentially want to give the children to the government.
Well, like we said, the Canadian government is tip of the spear for this LGBTQ crap, and they have counselors that specifically are targeting foster homes.
Yeah.
And they're transitioning hundreds of foster children that don't have parents, that have nobody to tell them. There's long-term repercussions for these things that you want to do, such as getting puberty blockers or cutting your genitals off or mutilating yourself. And there was one transition surgeon in particular that had transitioned over 500 children within the foster care system just within Vancouver.
Not only transition, but I mean, some of them were allowed to believe that they were the different gender. They were basically pushed to say, yes, you're a different gender, so this makes you special.
Yeah, a little bit of confusion, and they're pushing you right down the path that you can't come back from. It was crazy. Yes. Some of the other things was immigration. And when I first moved to Canada, immigration was not an issue. Canada is one of those few countries that actually needs immigrants because they're not reproducing. They have a huge landmass, so they had everything right for immigration, and they were the model for immigration worldwide. So it's amazing how spectacularly they were able to destroy that system to the point where there's not enough housing. Like, we had to move at the end because we had a burst pipe in our house. We went from a 3-bedroom, over 1,000 square foot apartment for $2,000 downtown Vancouver to $3,500 for a small 1-bedroom.
And I mean, with immigration, I guess I considered myself an immigrant towards Canada. They don't tell you the whole truth, because even when things were good before, recently, the healthcare waits were insane. I mean, finding apartments was still very hard. And the fact that they pull from different countries more immigrants than from others, you always feel like, oh, why do those people get to advance faster than me to get citizenship, for example, or to get permanent residence? It seems like because of the way the system's been set up and how you can get permanent residence and who's a temporary worker, who's a student, it's very skewed towards certain groups of people. And I mean,
well, we'll throw some statistics up here, but the amount of immigrants that are currently coming into Canada is surpassing all the immigrants for the last 10 years. They just can't support that much of an influx all at once. It's not that Canadians don't want immigration. And for the most part, it's all legal immigration. So it's not the same debate that's happening in the States. It's all legal immigration, but they're flooding the market too much. There's not enough jobs, and cost of living is going way up.
And they're having these immigrants go to the cities specifically. So, I mean, instead of kind of spreading out the share of housing and healthcare costs, they're all concentrating in the city cores. And I mean, just yesterday or 2 days ago, the Trudeau government did put a cap on temporary foreign workers of 20%. But I mean, this is coming towards the end.
There's multiple scams that you can see when it comes to the education system and getting PR, or buying a house, opening a business and getting PR, or these scams that you can pay a business to get you PR through giving you a job.
And the LMIAs.
It's crazy. But I worked with a lot of immigrants. I worked in the security industry, and because we knew we were trying to leave Canada for 4 years, jobs were hard to get in Canada near the end, and I was taking really crappy jobs, and I was working with nothing but immigrants. And the stories of these immigrants, it was heartbreaking because it was not only making things hard for people that were natural Canadian citizens, but it was even worse for these immigrants.
Yeah.
A lot of immigrants initially would come, the veil of Canada would fall, but they would leave with their PR and go back to India. By the end, these people were coming, and within 6 to 12 months, they weren't even waiting for the PR. They were going home.
Not willing.
And especially the Indian immigrants, they were well educated, had master's degrees. They just had to recertify in Canada. They had homes that they owned back in India. I mean, and when I would ask them questions, they said they could not believe the moral fabric of the Canadian government specifically. They did not want to have children. They did not want to raise their children there. It was far too progressive and far too liberal. And I'm not saying I grew up as a liberal in California. This is not normal liberalism. This is crazy.
Extreme far left progressiveness.
And the immigrants would see it. And very often, for an immigrant to actually recognize something, it takes longer because they don't speak the language and they're watching the propaganda news and things like this. But by the end, immigrants were just waking up left and right.
It was very easy to see. And also like with the students, and there's a lot of scams with students too. So it's not about immigration is bad. It's about the government is not controlling or able to properly use those numbers to their advantage. They're just essentially making everybody miserable because nobody can get healthcare, nobody can have a house, nobody can do anything, nobody wants to raise their kids there because of the ideological bends of schools. So
maybe we'll talk about
became untenable.
Maybe we'll talk about healthcare because everybody thinks the Canadian healthcare system is amazing. And I didn't have a lot of healthcare problems in the beginning when I was there, so I didn't notice. The Canadian healthcare system is a joke. The Canadian healthcare system is the equivalent to what the American military is to the U.S. government on how much spending they're doing for it. But the Canadian government spends so much money on their medical system, and yet it's completely dysfunctional.
And it's their pride and joy. It's one of the things that most Canadians say they're proud of, the healthcare system, and that yet, like behind closed doors, they know how long the wait times are. They know how bad the quality of care is. I mean, having to go see 10 different doctors for then to having to wait months to see a specialist.
You can't even find
people are dying.
You can't even find a family doctor. You have to go into walk-in clinics if you're able to get in because the lineup's so long.
Or the emergency room, which is even like a 10, even longer hour wait. I mean, if something's seriously wrong with you, even though they have a tier system, so it's triage, so whoever's the worst gets attention first. I mean, because they're so under capacity with doctors and nurses, even the people that are very, very seriously hurt and could die have to wait because there's not enough people to see them.
They are so short on doctors because they've handicapped doctors in so many ways. We don't have time to get into this video, but financially, if doctors get degrees in Canada and work there, they are out of that country as fast as they can be because the system is just designed against them and it's designed to take their money. You're not going to make a lot of money in Canada if you're doing that. I personally got my paramedic degree when I was in Canada, and they had special regulations to pay paramedics $2 an hour if you didn't have a call. It seems completely illegal, but there's loopholes. Now, if you did get a call for that hour, you get a regular wage of like $16. But when you were in training, it was there was no way you were going to make it past the 2 or 3 years you needed to get. So, yeah.
And I mean, coming from Mexico, which is a completely different healthcare system, we have the private sector. And if you have insurance, you can go to a private doctor, be seen that same day. So I was used to that. I was used to, something hurts or I'm sick. I go to that specific doctor, like your ENT doctor, and then I get cured. In Canada, no, here's a Tylenol, here's an antidepressant drug, here's a birth control drug. That's basically the only things they can prescribe.
They literally ask you, what do you want them to prescribe? And then you tell them, and then they give you the prescription. They're not looking for the root cause of the problem. No. They're looking to just get you out of the office. Here's the prescription. Go away. Yeah. And I would like to talk about the big moral, it really woke me up of what Canada really was. And it really made me rethink the idea of God. And that's the MAID program Canada's implemented. Yeah. If you don't know what the MAID program is, that's
medical assistance in dying.
And why don't you explain to them what it is?
So the MAID program, medical assistance in dying, is essentially euthanasia. So it started off as if you were really, really sick and you're bedridden with cancer and there's no way that you're ever going to improve, then euthanasia might be for you if you don't want to suffer through those final months.
Okay,
or
everybody
whatever.
knows what euthanasia is, and that I'm not so much against euthanasia, but what makes the medical assisted and dying program so bad is they're trying to implement it for homeless populations, and they're trying to say children should be able to have this MAID program, this MAID service, but you're giving them giving kids puberty blockers and antidepressants, and now you're wondering why these kids are going to want to die.
Yep.
Like, you don't have to have a good reason other than you're depressed, and that's enough to qualify you for the MAID program in Canada. A lot of people lose their jobs or they're poor or whatever, and it's almost like this fast track to save the Canadian government money.
And not only that, I mean, there's also been reports that the MAID program has been offered to veterans who, for example, there was a lady that requested a ramp be installed in her house because she couldn't get in and out with a wheelchair. And the response she got was, well, have you considered the MAID program? So instead of helping her install a ramp, they wanted to just get rid of her. And she of course said no. But then there's cases where the MAID program was allowed to go through for, I think it was a 20-something-year-old who had a slight deafness in one ear, and that was making them so depressed and so crippled.
Well,
they weren't offered help. They took it, and this person died.
Canada only has 36 million people in it, and one of the number one causes of death is the government through the MAID program.
Yeah.
And people don't believe that, but we'll throw some statistics up here, and it's crazy how many people the government is killing. That, like, I understand there's special cases for special people, but at the rate and the reasons they're allowing this to happen is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it's the reasons.
I guess we can also talk about, we kind of touched on it already, but the LGBTQ politics within Canada and Vancouver, it completely rules the day, and that they took away Canada Day in many cities across Canada.
Yeah, it's because colonialism.
Because of colonialism, and they're replacing it with Pride season. So in a lot of places you may hear about a Pride parade.
Yeah.
That's how it started in Canada. Then it was a Pride Day. Then it was a Pride Week.
Yeah.
And then it was a Pride Month. And that now it's a Pride season.
Yeah, it's all summer.
So it's crazy.
And how much people defend it. But also, just speaking with regular people, it's not that they're super in favor of all of these things and LGBTQ and SOGI 123, which is sexual orientation and gender identity in schools. It's that, number one, they might not know, and number two, they're too scared to speak up because they don't want to be seen as going against the current or as hateful. Because
this isn't a country where you're allowed gay marriage, and gay people had all the same rights regular people had. When I talk about LGBTQ politics in Canada, it's extremism, and a lot of it has to do nothing to do with sexuality. It's, if you don't support the Ukraine war, you don't support the LGBT community. This is crazy. I don't support the Ukraine war, and I don't support a lot of the policies that is being pressed through this LGBTQ cudgel on the general population.
And that's the thing, the groups, the enclaves, it's not even that many people, but because the rest of the people are silent, they seem very loud because they are the loudest. But it's this group of people that are all the same. It's the same, get vaccinated or die. It's the same as the Ukraine war, the Palestine people, all of these groups that you see protesting or that you can't speak up against. They're the same ones.
Well, they've ruled Canada for so long. They've been able to change all the legislative structures within not only the governmental system but the private system, and just it's stripping freedoms from people. And it's I really hope the conservative government gets in there. I don't know if they will, because Trudeau's talking about making this crazy coalition where he's going to unite all the parties against the Conservatives. We'll see what happens. But let's go into drugs, crime, and homelessness.
Let's go into drugs. Yeah.
That's another reason we left.
I think that's one of my main reasons, at least. I mean, other than the ideological part and the cost of living, coming from Mexico City, one of the most dangerous places, and people are always talking about how dangerous Mexico City is, how you could get killed. I mean, if you know where to go and where not to go, you can be pretty safe, just don't be stupid. But when I moved to Canada, it was I feel so much safer. And over the years, especially during COVID, but over the years, I started to realize that the drug problem was out of control in Canada and that people are literally going crazy on the streets.
Okay, first of all, we need to clear up what the drug problem is, because people are not going to believe when I say this.
Yes.
But all drugs are legal to do in public in Vancouver. We're talking about heroin on the streets, crack. Now they're talking about they want to give free drugs to anybody that wants them. It's absolutely crazy, and the mental illness that is being by this massive public drug use is crazy. You're seeing people with machetes and baseball bats going down the street.
Yeah.
There was a gentleman pushing his stroller down the street, and a homeless man stabbed him in the neck with a knife.
It was at Starbucks, yeah. A Starbucks that's very close to where we live.
It was crazy. A guy spit in your face and started yelling at you.
Spit in my face.
I wasn't with you.
Yeah, and you weren't there with me. And then I've also gotten chased by people, or people have followed me for several blocks. And these are not, normal people. You can clearly see the mental decline that has been allowed to essentially, for lack of another word, like penetrate all of at least the downtown Vancouver core, but it started moving elsewhere. I mean, when I first got there, Hastings Street, which is the street towards the east of
Main and Hastings, yeah. We only lived a few blocks from there.
But that one was kind of bad. But through the years, and especially during COVID, with the desperation and with, everything else being closed, people started moving up. The people from Hastings that were very down on their luck and with a lot of mental issues as well started moving and spreading around the city.
And I will say this.
Then they stayed around the city.
I lived in the States a lot of my life, and there's all kinds of different kinds of crime in the States. In Canada, it's very peaceful, and the crime rates are really low. It's almost completely all stemming from drug use and drug users. And if you fix that problem, you're going to fix the majority of crime problems. I will say drug users are well subsidized by the Canadian government there. So maybe they're not really as violent as they are in the States. So when somebody's asking for change in Vancouver, they're just asking for change. In the States, if they're asking for change in some cities, they're asking for your wallet. That being said, it's not about poverty is not the primary reason pressing crime. It's mental illness through drug use.
Or exacerbated or due to drug use. There was also in the 80s, they closed down a sanatorium and released all of these people onto the street with no support. And then there's other provinces, especially for Vancouver, which has now legalized drugs, even though now they realize how bad of an idea that was, and they're trying to curtail that and pull it back, but they're not able to. It's because the resources haven't been given to the people that most need them. Number one, because there's no money. But number two, because there's this idea that being compassionate means letting people, giving people freedom, I guess, to do what they want in this case. But it hasn't worked out. It's not working out. The needle exchange programs, all of the compassionate
safe
care,
injection sites, tent cities. And when we talk about tent cities, their parks are just taken over by tents. You're not So I worked at a bar, and the bar across the street had multiple beds in front of it. So they tried to call the police, asking them to move their beds. Police came out and said, we're not allowed to touch their stuff. They said, well, our customers can't get in and out. They said, we're not touching their stuff. They're allowed to be there, which is absolutely insane. I guess the last thing maybe we'll touch on.
Just on this point, to make people understand, again, I'm a female from Mexico. I'm pretty short. Walking the dog at night towards the end, I did not feel safe at all. I wouldn't even do it. There were needles on the street. There's feces everywhere.
Well, maybe I'll tell a quick...
It's completely dirty. The whole city is disgusting. It's full of everywhere.
Maybe I'll tell a quick story. I was a bouncer at a bar, and there was a parking lot next to us, and a guy was breaking into a car. He broke the window, so I slammed him on the ground, held him there for the cops, called the cops. Half an hour later, when the cops came, and I held him down for half an hour, the cops said, let him go. It's less than $1,000 worth of damage, and he didn't take anything from the car. I said, what did you say? So crime's legal as long as you're doing under a certain dollar amount of crime, which is nuts.
There's at least in BC, there's this catch and release program where depending on the color of your skin, depending on what ethnicity and nationality you are, you essentially get let go because, you already have it so hard that we're just going to let you go instead of rehabilitating you and letting you keep doing crime, and they'll catch them and release them, and it's a never-ending cycle. Most of the violent crime that happens in Vancouver is done by repeat offenders.
Well,
So, I mean,
maybe let's close out with
They
the
don't care.
educational system. And now I was a bit older when I got to Canada, so the educational system really was people I was working with that were going to college and university. Me asking them questions and my jaw dropping, and be like, "That's not an education." When I went to school, critical thinking was the basic foundation for everything.
Yeah.
And so basically, you would have to learn both sides of the argument and then be able to debate both sides. Now, what they do in these Canadian schools is they give you approved sources that are government approved sources that you're only allowed to take information from there, and then not tell both sides, but tell the side that you're told to write on, which is always the same side. If it's the Ukraine-Russian war, it's the Ukraine war you're writing about. And so the kid was telling me this, the busboy at my work, and I said, "Do you know anything about Russia or what's going on?" And well, he started reciting all these facts about Ukraine, so I just gave the other side of the story, so it would be more balanced. He didn't believe me. I gave him the sources. He researched it. He brought that to class. They told him he's going to fail if he ever takes any sources other than the approved source, and he's not allowed to do that again. He shouldn't be asking questions outside of the approved sources. This is absolutely insane to me.
yeah. And I mean, it wasn't as bad when I went to school. So from 2011 to 2015, university in Vancouver, it wasn't that marked, but the beginnings of the ideological bent that everybody was supposed to go on were already there. So being very, very nice and very, very focused on LGBTQ rights and people that are different from us. All of the land acknowledgements that are done before every single thing, every single game, every single speech that anybody ever gives, they have to acknowledge that they're on stolen land. So they're on Musqueam.
yeah.
I don't even remember it,
Well,
but I used to know it by heart because you had to do it every single time anybody spoke about anything
Well, this is
on his stage.
I almost forgot about that. And you're right. You have to give these man acknowledgements. And I always thought they were leading to something else, and they finally did. The Canadian government is now giving huge swaths of Canada to Indigenous tribes, which if you own land or a house on this land, you're no longer governed by the Canadian government. You're now governed by these tribes. And they're choosing certain tribes to work with. And they're going to change large swaths of Canadian law because the government itself can't change it. So they're going to do it through these tribes, I believe. And we'll have to keep an eye on that. Okay, well,
Because there's no education,
I guess that's why we left Canada, or at least
essentially.
some of it.
Yeah.
I,
There's a lot more to talk about, so we'll probably do more of a series eventually.
yeah.
But I guess for now, thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe. We're trying to grow the channel. We're starting back up again now that we're here in Mexico, and we really want to turn it into a free speech kind of space. And I guess, have a great rest of your day.
Oh, we're trying to keep wokeism out of Mexico, so please like and subscribe.
Yes.
Adios.
Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy.
Don't do that.
Oh, you don't want that?
Hi, I'm Nat.
Are we going to do another one?
We're doing another one.
Oh, it is. Okay, I'm Guy.
No, idiot. Let me start.
Okay, well, I'm doing my best here. This is what I have to work with every day, people.
Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy.
And today we want to talk about why we left Vancouver, Canada.
Our home. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy.
Stop doing the pointing! Stop it. Hi, I'm Nat. Dude, I haven't done this in a long time. Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy. Wait, last one. I'm crying now.
Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy.
And today we want to talk about why we left Vancouver, Canada.
I don't want to say anything.
You're not supposed to say anything.
Oh, okay.
Just stand there and smile. Just say, I'm Guy. Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy.
And today we want to talk about why we left Vancouver, Canada.
I also left.
Why we left.
Yeah, we left with the dog. Go ahead. Start.
Go pick her up.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick her up.
Why?
Start.
Hi, I'm Nat,
And I'm Guy,
and today we want to talk about why we left Vancouver, Canada.
and this is our dog.
You're terrifying.
Go on this way.
Hi, I'm Nat,
And I'm Guy.
and today we want to talk about why we left Vancouver, Canada.
That was good.
Are you sure?
Yeah.